Welcome, everybody, to this podcast for the book From Fear to Courage, 15 Insights to Achieve Your Dreams. And today I have the privilege to interview Dai Manuel, one of the authors. And Dai Manuel, welcome to this podcast.
Obed, as always, pleasure to see you again. I miss you, man. I miss Bali. But hey, you know what? Journey has brought me back to Canada for now. But I know I'll see you again.
Yeah, man, I miss you as well here in Bali. And it's great we're doing this podcast. I feel so privileged you're part of the book. You're a lifestyle mentor on a mission to inspire 1 million role models to live a more functional and fit and healthy and happy life. And you're a role model to many people, including myself. And yeah, it's just a beautiful privilege to have you on board. And that today you're making the time to let me interview you on fears and on how to overcome fears and how to engage courage. And so we're going to talk a bit more in depth about the chapter that you've written. And some parts you've shared in the chapter in the book, but some parts of this podcast, we're going a bit deeper. And because I'm very curious about certain things, and I know the audience would love to hear it as well. And so that's what we're going to do today. Are you excited?
I'm ready to rock and roll. No, this would be great, Obed. Listen, I'm honored to be here. And this project, this book that you've been working on, it's just awesome. I know it's going to inspire, motivate, educate, and just instill confidence in so many people. And I was just really honored to be part of that project. So I'm excited to see it finally come to fruition.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Oh, so nice. My first question, my first question I have for you today is: so you're in the process of helping so many people. You're writing books, you're doing coaching, you want to help people live healthy, be happy. And what's the drive behind it? In other words, why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I think it shifts over time, but I know for myself, I guess about 11 years ago, just went through some big shifts myself personally. I went from really being ego focused in a lot of the things that I did in my life, even though I still wanted to support and help people, which I was, but still a lot of the things, those motivations for doing certain things was definitely being guided a lot by how I wanted it to be perceived. How I wanted people to think about me, perceive me, especially found myself chasing titles, right? I found myself very much in a position where a lot of my self-worth, my self-value stemmed from my career. My identity was attached to that, being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, having a very large company, lots of people that I was responsible for and their families indirectly based on what the company was producing. So, I wanted to be perceived as the dude, right? And it's so funny when I think back on it, man. When I think back on it, I never really felt super connected. And I knew that things just, I had a certain belief system, certain value system. And I found myself out of integrity in some of those places, specifically around family, around relationships, even at certain points, my health, my mental health specifically.
And when
so I found sorry, what was that?
When was this?
This is about 11 and a half years ago, almost, 11 and a half years ago. That's sort of where I hit that peak, because it was a lot of my 20s, my early 30s, being 44 now. Those years from about 18 to say 33, 15 years, lots of professional growth, professional development, not so much on the self-development, right? And because I was again geared to I want to make more money. I want to be perceived as being successful. There were certain things that I was really attaching a lot of value to, but when I looked at my basic values, the ones that are truly core values. And you know what I mean by this, Obed. This, you and I could have a conversation today and you could say, Dai, what are your core values? What are those guiding principles? Those things that are non-negotiable in your life. And then we had a conversation maybe 20 years from now and you ask me the same question, chances are that those core values would be the same, because they really don't change a lot. They're right to our DNA, I feel. And, for me, family, faith, fitness, finances, fun. I like alliteration. It's the author in me, so lots of F's. But those have always been things that are very important to me, because I recognize that as long as I give it the attention that it's due, things just seem to have less friction. Not saying it's easier, not saying it's harder. It's just, even when I encounter challenges, I tend to navigate them in a healthier way, and I feel a lot better for it. But if I go back 11 and a half years ago, my coping mechanism was to drink. I would drink. I would have alcohol. End of the day, I'm stressed out. I'm feeling anxious, feel a bit overwhelmed. I'm in my private little place now. I'm going to drink. And that became a daily thing. At the end of every day, if it was a stressful work day, can I have a drink? And it just became really easy. And it really started to affect my life professionally and personally, to the point that I just couldn't do that anymore. Something had to give. And that's sort of where, my TEDx talk picks up on that day where, Christy asked me a very specific question in the heat of the moment while we were discussing about potentially splitting up, about her taking our girls, our daughters, who at the time were both under the age of 6, taking them to live in a different environment, or suggesting that maybe I leave our home because I wasn't providing a healthy environment for my kids to be in. I wasn't role modeling good behaviors, because really I was their first, superhero. Kids always look at their parents as their first superheroes. Forget Superman, forget Spider-Man. Mom and dad are the superheroes, right? That's how our kids look at us. And I'm also their first true role model of what a potential man could be, what a potential father could be, what a potential husband could be, a friend, a business partner, like all those things. And really, when I think back on it, I was not modeling behaviors I would be proud for them to replicate or model themselves. So, there was clearly a clash there, and some changes had to happen. So, and I always like to reiterate this, Obed, because I think, I know you have a very powerful origin story as well, which motivates you to do the things that you do and how you show up for people. And most of the time, many of us go on these epic journeys, right? The hero's journey. And we encounter big challenges along the way. We encounter people that influence us in a positive way, provide us with a guiding light when we were experiencing a lot of darkness. And then we come out of that. We work through the challenges, and then we come through the other side. And what do we want to do? We often want to go back to where we started and help others do the same thing. Any coaches, sometimes even teachers, people that are in that sort of mentorship type of role, I find that there's almost always, I shouldn't generalize, but most of the time when I've had conversations with them, they have a very powerful story of an experience that they've had that's inspired them and motivated them to now do what they do. And so similar to me, that's exactly what I experienced 11 and a half years ago. I haven't had any alcohol since. Could I have a glass of wine with my wife right now? Absolutely. But it just doesn't fit in my lifestyle and in my wants and desires and dreams and visions. It's just not part of it. And it's okay. I've learned to have much healthier ways of dealing with my stress, my anxiety, my overwhelm, because it's still there. It doesn't really go away, but I've just learned to manage it in a much healthier fashion.
Fascinating. Now, of course, I know a lot about what you shared. I already know because I've met you with Toastmasters here in Bali.
Yeah.
Fellow members, and just to see you speak and to see you sharing your story was always a huge inspiration for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to hear it again and to hear it in such a beautiful recap on this big question. Why do you do what you do? And you're giving a big long answer, which is great, with a lot of in-depth. And I love it, man. And you mentioned it, a TEDx talk. That was recently, right? Only a few months ago. You did it in Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah.
How was it like to do a TEDx talk? And how was that process?
It was one of the most fulfilling and satisfying experiences I've had in my life, but also one of the most intimidating, stressful, and, to be honest, at times overwhelming experiences of my life. So it's a bit of both. It was from the time that I was invited to submit an application to be considered as a speaker, from that time to the day I took the stage and stood on the red dot that TED is known for, it was 7 months. 7 months, where this occupied a lot of mental space and energy for me. So you can imagine it was quite the buildup over that 7 months. And as I got closer and closer to the day where I knew I'd be speaking in front of 3,000 plus people, I was like, oh my goodness, this is one take. I mean, it's not like you can do multiple takes. It's like, it's like, this is happening. And it's so concise, right? Like it's a very specific message that's got to be delivered in 11 minutes or less. It's like, whoa, every word serves a purpose. And it was challenging for sure. But, it was also the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. So yeah, I feel very proud and very accomplished. It's been on my vision board for 7 years. So it's nice to be able to check that one off, finally, get that one done. So yeah, thanks for asking.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. 3,000 plus people and recording. Such a beautiful recording and 11-minute speech. For those who are watching, I highly recommend it. Yeah. Without stealing the thunder, what's this TED Talk about?
Well, the title is Why Vulnerability is a Human Thing. And I make reference that, the term vulnerability has a lot of, let's just say, I don't want to say misconceptions, but I would say that there's a lot of different ideas around how to define vulnerability and how vulnerability shows up in their life. Has often been role modeled by past experience or association, the people that they tend to hang around with, the way that they feed their mind and grow and learn. And I was definitely one of those people. I used to believe that the term vulnerability was not a good thing. It's a bad thing. That's a weakness, like you don't want to be vulnerable. If you're vulnerable, someone will take advantage of you. You'll be judged. Like, don't do that. And yet when I think about this last decade of my life, that's the one thing that's allowed me to be more connected, more authentic, more understood, as well as deeper, been able to foster much deeper relationships with people, men and women included, and that's because of shifting my belief systems around what vulnerability means. And so I like to say in my talk, vulnerability is not a woman thing. Vulnerability isn't a man thing. It's a human thing. Because it really is. It's not a feminine quality. It's not a masculine quality. It's a human quality. And so that's really encapsulates sort of the key message I want people to at least be open to having a conversation about, just having a conversation. That's it. I'm not saying that this is the answer, far from it, but I hope people are triggered just enough to say, maybe I need to challenge my beliefs a little bit to expand my understanding of this term called vulnerability.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You mentioned the term beliefs. Now, I know what you mean with that. However, some of the people who are watching might not know. What do you mean with a belief system?
Well, so, we have our conscious mind, we have our subconscious mind, right? We have our feeling mind, our emotional mind. I mean, there's all these sort of different aspects that make us up, make us to be who we are. And there's similarities that we all share, for sure, especially on a biological, chemical level. We're very, very similar functionality. However, there's that humanistic quality that makes us all very unique. And this often relates right back to how we perceive the world that we look at through our own eyes, that we experience with our own touch and feeling, right? Like that's very, very personal. And yet we have to wonder, well, how do we learn? How do we actually learn things? And so we often will hear things, we read things, we're told things, but we also experience things. And often, this cumulative approach formulates our understanding of the world, our worldview, if you will. And we have certain things that we believe based on a lot of those experiences, what we've been told. And this is where we can run into problems, right? Especially with the influence of media today. Sometimes we'll see something, we'll read it, and we'll automatically presume that, that must be absolutely true. And so all of a sudden now we accept that as a belief that we accept as being true. So we might now have that influence that world perspective, but it may not be true. And that's why having this sort of inquisitive mind or inquisitive nature while living life, not taking everything for granted, nor taking everything for face value, and just being able to question where some of your understanding and beliefs around your worldview is formed. Where's the roots lie? And, I think back to my parents, even as a kid, some of the things that they would have shared, right? Like think about it when you were a kid, right? Parents might say, hey, don't touch the fire, it's hot, or don't touch the oven, the oven top, the stove top. Don't touch that element, you'll burn yourself. And it's like, oh, okay, I won't touch that. I believe that now to be hot. But did I experience it? Well, for me as a kid, as 5 years old, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I remember being told that. And I went and I was like, well, I'll just touch it quickly. A little bit too long. I burned my hand pretty good. I had a very real experience. And trust me, my belief was like absolute after that. It was like, no questioning that. And so we have to understand that experience also helps solidify some of those beliefs, because you can't dissuade what you experience. Right? That's different than just being told or reading a book and saying, okay, well, this is what I believe now to be true. But when you experience it personally, there's a deeper rooted connection to that system, if you will. And so, I always invite people. It's like, how do you learn what you know? And I'll ask people, like, what do you believe to be absolutely true? Unquestionably, right? Non-negotiable. Like, what do you believe to be absolutely true? And it's kind of hard. Like, I mean, I'll ask you, but what do you believe to be absolutely true in your life?
Wow, that's a big question, though. What I believe all of us have a huge potential.
And why do you believe that, though?
Because I've seen it. Because I've been taught that by my mentors. Yeah. And I've seen people change where they were not reaching their full potential, and then they made certain changes. They read certain books, and then they started to change, and they started to believe in themselves, and then they achieved much more than they could ever dream.
Yes. And it's almost like that scientific method approach, right? Where, you might have a certain belief because you read in a book or a mentor told you, but then after you were able to experience and see that culminate into an experience, that just makes that belief so much more powerful within you, right? Like it becomes less questionable. It eliminates doubt, right? But it was based on your experience. I mean, you can take the mentor's word for it and be like, okay, well, he obviously knows a lot. He's experienced a lot. So I trust him. I believe him. And this is where it gets a little scary, right? Well, I mean, let's just think about the last US president. Do we believe everything that comes out of his mouth? I mean, really? Why? And what's the motivations there? So, I just want people to have a very open and very curious mind. To just always be asking questions, right?
Beautiful. So good we have this talk. It's really beautiful how you describe limiting beliefs. That was such a beautiful explanation that I'm glad we got it on recording. How is that? How do you feel? You talked first also about vulnerability and how important that is, not just for women, but also for men and for everybody. How is that related to fears?
Well, I think there's a fear of being vulnerable, right? I mean, I always like to equate it to this. Many of us have had a serious relationship at some point in our life. At some point, maybe we've fallen in love with somebody, and it's a beautiful thing. And maybe we chose to be very open and honest and share things that maybe we haven't shared with anybody else before. And then all of a sudden, maybe that relationship goes in a direction that wasn't planned for. Maybe the relationship ends, and it doesn't end in a very positive way. It ends in a very negative way. Maybe they use what you've said and shared with them, what you believe was confidential between just the two of you, those people with that bond together. And then all of a sudden you have what you shared, maybe shared with somebody else openly, maybe in a very public forum. You see, I mean, there's some pretty horrific stories online. You see couples break up and then go crazy on social media. I had some friends here in Eastern Canada that had a very similar experience where they were attacking each other on Facebook. They had lots of 3 little kids, and here they are attacking and fighting over Facebook and sharing things about each other that honestly shouldn't be shared in that forum. You could tell it was things that it was between them. And so you can imagine if you had that experience and you were vulnerable and allowed yourself to be vulnerable, allowed yourself to be open, honest, transparent, and really just connect. And all of a sudden, you have this really negative experience where someone's taken advantage of that vulnerability. How would you feel about it? Do you think you'd be afraid about being vulnerable again later? Yeah. I mean, I know for myself, that's happened many times in the past. And yet I would let that experience then influence any other opportunity to be vulnerable, right? Even with my own family, being open and honest about some of the emotions or some of the stress I might be dealing with. Thinking that, no, I won't burden them with that. I won't let them know how I'm feeling. But yet I'd have these negative feelings in me and they'd come out. Usually me losing my temper, me saying something I didn't mean, and it's not targeted at them, but it's so easy to often attack those we're closest with because we're very comfortable with them. They get to know us better than anybody. And I never felt good about that. I still don't feel good about it. Every once in a while, I lose my temper and I'm like, and I'll say something in the moment. And I'm like, that's not me. Why did I do that? I hate that, And so this idea of fear and vulnerability, to be vulnerable takes a lot of courage. It definitely does. I look at the men's groups that I've been facilitating, me and Nick, right? For the last 3 years, we've been facilitating Mentorship Mondays. And it's amazing to see the men come together. But what's super interesting, if men have never experienced that kind of a situation or setting where they come together to just share what's alive and real for them. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be sad, it could be happy, it could be great. It's whatever's real for you in that moment. And there's some men that are sort of looking around the table and they're like, what am I doing here? What is this thing? And you can tell there's intimidation. There's also a little bit of fear. There's concern. There's a lot of worry, a little bit of anxiety. And they're like, I don't know if I should be here. I don't know what I should. Am I going to have to share something? I don't know if I want to share. How that little voice in our head gets. It's like it's really loud, right? And it starts to influence us and make us feel certain emotions. And those emotions can sometimes become overwhelming. And then, it's like a downward spiral.
What do you mean with little voice? That little voice in
we all have these little voices in our head, these little things, you're about to do something and there's this little voice in here saying, okay, do it, or don't do it. Or if you do this, be careful, don't hurt yourself. We have these little voices in our mind. And what's really interesting, if you meditate a lot, you probably hear these voices a lot more than most. We can become quite good at distracting ourselves from hearing the voices. And I think about myself at times, just Netflix, put on Netflix. Or back in the day, I would have some alcohol just so I didn't have to listen to those little voices, those self-doubt, the criticism, some of those little fears. I would just I'm going to push you away. I don't want to deal with you. Just go away. I knew if I had a few drinks, I wouldn't have to think about it until tomorrow. And so we learn to cope sometimes rather than look for healthier ways to manage that, to deal with it, to decrease some of that stress we might be feeling and anxiety or to really keep ourselves mentally healthy as well as spiritually healthy. And so back to the question at hand, this fear and vulnerability piece, I find that initially when you're first practicing the skill of opening up, being transparent, being open, being honest, sharing with people how you feel or what you're experiencing or how you're feeling based on a certain experience or a situation, it takes practice. I believe vulnerability is a skill, just like being a great leader. Being able to be vulnerable, it's a skill. And it's not just something to just do for the sake of being vulnerable. Brene Brown in her books talks about this. Being vulnerable is not about creating shock and awe. It's not about, hey, look at me, I'm being vulnerable. Hi, it's not for attention. It's for connection. It's for understanding. It's for relating. And it's also for not feeling so damn alone. We get these men coming and you can tell they're fearful, but then somebody else shares first. And then they're like, wow, me too. I've had a similar experience. And all of a sudden they start to realize that, wow, these things that I've been keeping inside, these little voices that have been criticizing me, there's other people here that have the same experience. Here, I thought it was just me. And we realize we're not so alone when we start to open up and share with others, because now you start to realize we're so much more alike than we are different. And I find that vulnerability is a wonderful way to experience that connection.
Wow.
But you got to be courage. You got to have courage, though, because it's just a bit of a leap of faith initially. Because if you do have a lot of fear and past experiences that weren't positive, it's really hard to do it, right? It's really hard.
Right. I love this explanation, and I'm very what comes up for me. The question is, can you give an example of your own life where you were faced with something and then you chose to be vulnerable, and it helped you overcome a certain fear that helped you achieve part of your dream?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think back to when I was 14 years old and the doctor pulling my mom aside at the doctor's office and saying to my mom, Betty Ann, your son Dai, he's morbidly obese. Now, at the time, at 14 years of age, I didn't know what morbid meant, nor did I understand what obese meant, but I knew it didn't sound good, And just to give some context here, from the age of 9 to 14, we talk about those inner voices. We talk about the self-talk, especially in my situation, the negative self-talk, the low self-opinion I had of myself, the very low self-esteem. Well, I learned ways of sort of sheltering myself, being very private, being very introverted. And I would experience things to make me feel better by playing video games, watching movies, and eating foods that provided a very quick uplift, right? Eating, there's a lot of emotions that can be created through the foods that we eat. Let's be honest. You see people, like, just look at kids, right? I remember my kids when they were toddlers, right? Take them to a birthday party. And we normally wouldn't feed them very much sugar at all. Every once in a while, but usually it was more natural foods. Just based on my experience, I wanted our kids to be healthier, right? And we go to someone's party and they have cake. Well, of course we're going to let them have the cake. It's an experience. It's a special event, cake. But man, they eat the cake for about 15, 20 minutes after. It's like, woo, they're the happiest people there. About 21 minutes, a minute after 20 minutes, boom, there's a crash and the tears start, the fights start. It's like just an emotional roller coaster. That's why I say it's always great to watch kids when they eat sugar, because that's actually what happens to adults too. It's just, we've learned to that's normal for us, especially if we've had a life of chronic overconsumption of sugar. We're used to the roller coaster of emotions and energy and motivation. And then we start wondering, why am I on this cycle? Anyways, I digress. Back to your question. At age 14, after 5 years of eating a lot of very poor nutrition value food, but high in calories, because I was consoling myself, much like I did with alcohol. I used food as a way to cope, to deal with some of my overwhelming stress. It made me feel better in the moment. But overall, it didn't make me feel better. It made me feel worse. And by age 14, after 5 years, I was very, very big. As I said, obese. And I had a lot of mental health challenges, just feeling depressed, feeling withdrawn, feeling isolated, just not liking who I was and believing that nobody else could ever like me. Nobody else would ever love me. And so you can imagine at 14 years old, there's a lot to deal with. It's really heavy, as they say. And I remember one day just coming to a moment, and I share a bit of this in the chapter. So I won't go into too much detail because I want people to read the book. They better pick up the book because, my stories, I go into more detail on this. And I made a decision, but that decision to make some changes, to get healthy, wasn't an easy one. There was a lot of fear there. Fear of, I'll probably fail. I can't get healthy. Look at me. What do I know? I don't even know how to exercise. I don't know how to work out. I don't know how to eat. I don't know how to do this. And yet, as fearful as I was of change, to be honest, change can be intimidating, right? There's just a lot of concern around change. I was more afraid of not changing than I was of changing. And so that's an important thing to note. If we often think about those moments in our life where we can go left or we can go right. And we know if we made the other decision, So if we chose to go left for a certain reason, we know that had we gone right, our life would be very different. It's like two very distinct paths. I call it a fork in the road, right? And that was a fork in the road moment for me. And I was more afraid of the idea of staying on the path that I was on, because I knew deep down I wasn't going to get healthier. It was only going to get worse. It was only going to get harder as I aged if I didn't make changes. And I was less afraid of the idea of changing, just figuring out a way to do it. But it all started with me being vulnerable and sharing that with my parents, opening up to them and saying, you know, this is how I'm feeling. I don't like who I am. I don't like being this way. I want to get healthy. And I remember opening up, especially to my dad, you know, about that. And it was amazing. I asked if he could go buy me a bike because I knew I wasn't going to go to a gym. There's no way I was going to go into a gym. That was way too intimidating. I wanted to work out and exercise on my own. And I went to the library, got books out. My kids still laugh, right? They're like, Dad, why didn't you just Google it? And I'm like, your dad's older than Google, you know? And, but long and short, that's how it started. It started with an act of vulnerability, being able to open up and share how I was feeling and sharing that I wanted to make some changes, because it also gave them permission as well as an invitation to now potentially support me, which they did. They did. My dad took me out that afternoon. He bought me a mountain bike so I could start biking every day. And that's what I did. I just cycle every day. I go out for an hour, go for a ride, come home, you know, I'd prepare my meals. I'd make sure I was eating certain healthy foods, cut sugar out, you know, just some very basic changes. It wasn't massive, but man, it was awesome, because within just a matter of weeks, my confidence started to improve. I started to feel better. I started to handle stress more efficiently. People could tell that my energy was shifting. So I started to have better conversations and feel more connected to people. And also I saw my health changing. I saw myself getting fitter, feeling more confident. And with that confidence came clarity that, wow, if I keep doing this, good things are going to happen. So I trusted the process. 20 months later, I released all that weight, got fit, got healthy, really got into a lifestyle. And it hasn't changed since. It's been challenged, of course, over the years. You know, it's a long time ago now, but the core principles and belief systems that I formed through that experience has helped guide me a lot through my life, you know? So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I know it's fear, vulnerability. That was one experience that's very alive and real for me still to today. And I find it very relatable for people. I mean, our health is so precious. And, you know, when you don't have health, it's all that you want. You know, it's all that you want. You just want to feel good. You want to feel happy. You want to feel just good, you know? So anyways.
Beautiful. I think that's a beautiful story of your personal life. And it's true that health is the foundation. Mm-hmm. It helps us to feel good. And when we feel good, we attract what we feel. So we also attract people in our lives that are in a higher frequency and are also fit and healthy. And it works positively in every area of our lives. Yeah. And it also kickstarts a certain journey of yours, which you shared in your chapter, without stealing the fun. But I think it's just nice to touch on it, because that's also important. But I love what you share, and also because it's just so real. You know, it's when you share it, advice, you share suggestions. But when you share it like this, it really comes from your personal experience. And I think that makes it powerful. That's also what I've observed when I saw you speak at Toastmasters many times. That's why I hired you to help me with my speech. Remember? Preparing for the conference. And that's what I really realized, how when you started teaching me on a deeper level what public speaking was about, I understood, wow, you're a real expert on this. And I'm not surprised you made it to TEDx and you were allowed to give that speech to 3,000 people. And I'm not surprised you have so many followers and so many people who see you as a role model. And this story just proves that to me. And in this chapter, you also talk about four big life questions that help people overcome their fears. And it's, who am I? Where am I going? Why am I here? And what do I want? Now, in this chapter, you answer this in depth, what these questions are about and what they mean to you and why it is powerful. And I'm just curious, how did you discover those powerful questions?
Well, the interesting thing is I didn't discover those. Like, what I mean by that is these are questions I think we all are asking all the time. Whether we're present to it or not, that's another conversation probably entirely. But, these questions show up either in our subconscious or, if we're fortunate enough, in our conscious mind, where we actually will sit there and introspect, reflect, and create a space for ourselves to actually maybe answer that or try to tease out an answer. And if you struggle with doing that, well, that's why people work with people like yourself, Obed, right? Is to ask them the right questions and help them guide them through the process of answering those. That's what I do too. It's what we do as coaches, as mentors, as people that are there to support others through big changes, and these are foundational questions. The idea, who am I? What do I want? Those are big questions. But how often do we create the time or the energy or the space to actually answer them? Because I think for some of us, and especially as we age, because I've seen this, especially with my I tend to work with a lot of guys in their 40s, 50s, and even into their 60s. And, we have certain patterns that have been so ingrained into us because we've just done it for so long, believed that there was only one way to do a certain thing, to live a life, having certain belief about oneself that they just, again, like we talked about beliefs, it's what they've experienced for say 50 years. And all of a sudden I'm here to say, listen, you can do whatever you want. You can recreate your life. You can change now and spend the next 50 years doing something completely different. And it's like, whoa, what are you talking about? And there's that little bit of thing, even though deep down, they know they want to make some changes, but that question can be so intimidating, right? Like, what do I want? Like, what do you mean? What do I want? What do I watch on Netflix? What do I want on my pizza tonight? Like, no, what do you want for your life? And I know it's really overwhelming. And so I often will ask people sort of a follow-up part B to that question actually is okay, well, if you're not sure what you want, can you tell me what you don't want? Because sometimes it's a lot easier to say, well, I know I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Right. Like I remember back in my 20s, I was in the sciences originally, and I eventually moved into philosophy and English literature when I was going to university. And I knew that if I got that degree in either of those disciplines, I was really setting myself up either to go down a path to be work within the medical space, or on the art side, I could be a teacher or a lawyer. Well, Obed, I knew at that age, I don't want to be a lawyer. And to be honest, I don't want to be a teacher either. And so I'm like, okay, great. What do you do with a philosophy degree? I don't know. I always loved fitness though. I loved helping people with big health changes, and so that was something that I always did on the side, even while I was going to school. And so when all of a sudden I started to ask myself that question, what do I really want? Well, I want to continue to help people live their best life, their healthiest life, so they can literally thrive as they age. That's my biggest thing. It's like longevity. I want people to live a long life, but not a long life where they're challenged by health issue after mental health challenge. I want them to thrive for the whole timeline. Maybe I'm a bit naive. Maybe that's not absolutely possible. I like to think it is. You and I have had discussions around the blue zones. There's proof. There's people out there that are living into their hundreds and they're thriving. They're doing really well. I want a little bit of that. And when you start to look at some of the research, it's accessible for all of us. But it often boils down to lifestyle choices. It's the things that we do every day that impact that life that we're building, that we're living, right? Experiencing. And so anyways, yeah, man, I'm going way off topics. But back to your question. Yeah, that's sort of around those questions. I believe that they're already in all of us. It's just sometimes we're not fully aware of it. It's not on our conscious mind. It's just been suppressed into the subconscious. Because as kids, we're thinking about it all the time. It's like, what do you want to be when you grow up, Obed? Right? Remember our parents asking us that question. Right? Like, it's like, what do you want? What do you want to do with your life?
I think
you're
you're
asking it.
way on topic, by the way. This is perfectly on topic because these are four big questions and explain this beautifully. And I think it's especially what I take out from it is that I know that a lot of people don't. I feel the power of these questions. Again, who am I? Where am I going? Why am I here? What do I want? I think these are very powerful questions, and that's also I see, and I also saw it in my own life. Sometimes I remember about 12 years ago, I was also just doing the things that I was told to do, yeah. So beautiful questions, and for those who are watching, and people are watching. Some people they have big dreams. Most of the people who are watching have dreams, and they're curious how they can overcome their fears, and they're curious how to be more vulnerable and how that could work. So what would be your tip for them? So for those who are feeling fears for their dreams, what would be your suggestion to them?
Well, this is where I do like stoicism, right? And that philosophy of stoicism, this idea of trying to, what's the best way to put this? It's kind of bridling, bridling the term with horses, right? Like you put the mouth bit in there and it got the reins on it, sort of that way of controlling that horse, right? Think about the horse as just wild emotions. Well, stoicism is sort of the bridle, right? It's the bit with the reins, the saddle. It allows you to control emotions. And I find it's really useful for people like myself, where at times it's really easy for me to let my emotions get the better of me, to the point where it becomes almost irrational emotions, right? Like where it's just like, I don't know if you've ever had this experience. I'm sure you have, Obed. I think everyone probably has had an experience similar where, a little thing, just a little thing, upsets you a little bit, right? Like maybe you get cut off in traffic and it's like, okay, you bad person. You shouldn't have done that. We flip them the bird, as they say here in North America, put up our middle finger and be like, blah, blah, blah. But now we hold on to that emotion for a minute. Then another little thing happens. And it's like, we're going to amp it up a little bit, another 10%, and then another 10%. And then the next thing you know, you're just losing it. And it's this idea that we let our emotions get the better of us at times to an irrational level. And so I really appreciate sort of the stoicism, of the old Stoic philosophers specifically, this idea of being able to sort of keep our emotions in check enough so we can see things with a greater perspective. We can also self-reflect and be able to rationalize the best option or choice or decision we can make given the situation that we find ourselves. And I think it's important to have both balances. So I'm not saying turn into a robot with no emotion. No, far from it. That would make life pretty darn boring. We would miss out on so much, right? If we didn't have any emotion. Can you imagine seeing a work of art, seeing a Van Gogh painting in real life and just being like, whoa, like I just, the emotions there, right? That are attached to scenes, a masterpiece like that come to life in front of our eyes. I mean, imagine having no emotions and having like, whatever. Like, I just couldn't imagine living a life like that, And so back to the question at hand, is really just a wonderful way to start practicing rationalizing our fear is sometimes simply asking, what's the worst that could happen? Or just simply saying, what if? What if I didn't have this fear? What if I didn't have this concern? What if I already did this thing that I'm afraid of doing? How would I feel after the fact? Really try to think about why are we so darn afraid of whatever that thing might be? It's different. Like, I mean, if I look at things like jumping out of an airplane. Well, there's a very rational fear there. I could die. You could die. The parachute might not work, or I could go in tandem and his parachute doesn't work. 10,000 feet up, hit the ground. Well, that's the end. There's a very real fear. That's not an irrational fear. Okay. Yet to get on a plane and to be so petrified of flying because you're afraid you're going to die, is that really a rational fear? I mean, when you look at statistics, more people die from shark attacks than from plane crashes in a year. Like, So even thinking about that, should I stay out of the water for the rest of my life and not swim in any waters in fear of sharks attacking me? Well, now I'm limiting how I live my life. I'm stifling it. I'm shrinking it based on certain fears that I've tried to rationalize, but I don't think it's really been rationalized. It's irrational at times, you know? So we often take these little fears and we turn them into really big fears that can be immobilizing.
Know all about that.
Yeah.
When I was 22, I was
Listen, I was afraid of public speaking. No, but what was yours, Obed? I want to hear yours. Go. You're laughing, so I know this is a good story.
Yeah, when I was 22, I lived for 1 year in Australia. I'm from the Netherlands, and I went to Australia to live there. And I was so scared of the sharks, and I was scared. But I loved surfing. It was a whole process before I overcame that fear. And basically, what I learned there is from the Australians, no worries, mate. And yeah, I'm really glad that I overcame that fear of getting bitten by sharks, and I could just enjoy the surf. But I never surfed alone. I always wanted to be with other people when I was surfing there, because I always like, if a shark comes, it's still like 1, 2, 3. So it's still.
I love it, man. Oh, that's good. But you're right. That's a great example of what I'm talking about here. You know, a prime example. And I would invite those that are listening or watching right now, you know, just think about some of those fears that have been preventing you from thriving in your life. You know, think about those fears. Are they rational or are they irrational? You know, and start asking yourself, you know, like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I think back to 6 years ago, leaving a career of 17 years, there was a lot of fear there. I'm like, can I do this? You know, if I do this, can I make something work so I can continue to support my family as we embark on a new journey together? You know, like, am I being foolish in leaving a very stable career to go and do something I really want to do? There's a lot of fear there, you know? And I remember my wife saying to me, you know, like, you know, okay, let's think this through, Dai. I remember us sitting down and talking about this. And actually, I think we were at dinner at a restaurant. And I remember this conversation coming up, and you know, Christy was really good because she's really good at rationalizing the irrational. Like, she's just very good at that. You know, like, she's just got a very good mind for that. And I love that aspect about her so much. And because she helps me find clarity at times, as well as confidence that, hey, it's going to be okay. This is the right direction to go. You know, and hey, we all need a little bit of that in our lives. You know, and so here's the situation. You know, she's saying, Dai, what's the worst that could happen? We both leave our jobs. We get rid of a lot of our overhead, you know, get rid of one of the vehicles that we have. We get rid of a lot of our possessions. We get rid of our overhead so we don't have to pay any more rent and all that stuff. Like, we just simplify our expenses, our lifestyle, right? So we can travel full time as a family, experience the world together full time as a family. Because that's really what we wanted to do. We wanted to travel. We wanted to meet new people, experience new cultures, to just not be so fixed in our one place that we've lived for pretty much most of our life. You know, we wanted to experience the world. She had traveled in her early 20s, much like yourself, Obed, and she spent a couple of years in Australia and Southeast Asia and just traveling. So she wanted to get back to that. And she wanted to do it while we still had kids that liked hanging out with us, you know, still thought we were cool. And when they were young enough, as we were traveling, that was great. It was easy, right? And, but I remember us thinking about, like, what was the worst that could happen? Well, the worst thing that could happen is we'd probably run out of money, get stuck in the middle of the States, you know, and who knows where, and being out of money. Well, we've got family that cares about us. We got friends that would be willing to support us. We're also both very employable people. We can come back and get jobs. You know, kids can go back into school again. You know, like, when we started to rationalize this irrational fear that I had about leaving a career of 17 years, I started to realize, sheesh, what do I really have to be afraid of? You know, and what if I do go traveling? What are some of the amazing things that could potentially happen? And so you start to come from a creative of a what if scenario where it's like, what if? You know, and let your mind go, like, start dreaming, start envisioning, because that's what we're talking about here, right? You get rid of that irrational fear, all of a sudden, everything becomes possible. And it's a beautiful place to create from. And believe me, we can all create the life we want to be living. We really can.
I have goosebumps.
Put a shirt on. No, just joking. Warm up.
Beautiful, man. Wow.
Hey, thank you, Obed.
And thank you so much for today, for being here and for sharing your experiences and your wisdom with us. It's been
well, thank you. I mean, this has been awesome. I appreciate the stimulating questions as well, and allowing me the space to just sort of rant, go off on these tangents. And it's just sort of how my mind works at times. I always want to give so much, let's just say meat, you know, and for those that are vegan, some tofu to the situation, right? I know it's really easy just to say an answer, but I find that answers are so much more impactful when we have greater context and relatability. It's not like math questions, 2 + 2 is 4. I don't really need to be explained how that answer happened. But the kind of answers that we're talking about here and the kind of opinions that are being shared between the two of us, like for some people, it's like, whoa, what are you guys talking? But yeah, you and I have lived in this. We've subjected ourselves to this type of lifestyle, to this type of career path. So for us, this is like everyday conversation now. But I remember a time in my life where it wasn't. You probably remember a time in your life, Obed, where it wasn't. And I think that is the thing that people have to remember. Change is always possible. You can learn new ways of living to thrive. And you just got to be willing to say, hey, I want to make some changes, and not be afraid to ask for some help. There's so many people out there that can help. So many people, you know? So that can only happen when you're ready to help yourself. But that's it. That's all I got. Right. Just joking. That's all I got now, because I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh, that really is all I got right now.
It's beautiful timing, Dai, because I think you've shared so many beautiful wisdom, and it's good to wrap it up. And because sometimes when we want to go too far, too deep, too much, it just becomes overwhelming. And this was a really beautiful chunk of wisdom and experience that you shared with us today. And thank you again.
Thank you.
For those who are watching, Dai just shared some beautiful wisdom. And a lot of what was also the aim is that he didn't steal the thunder for his chapter in our book, From Fear to Courage, 15 Insights to Achieve Your Dreams, where Dai shares his journey, his fears, and how he overcame his fears and achieved his dreams, as well as 14 other entrepreneurs, including myself. And we all share our story. And this book is for sale very soon, or in June 2021, it's for sale. And it's now June, so in a few weeks it will be for sale. So probably when you listen to it, you can buy it. And all the proceeds of this book will go to charity organizations in Bali to help at-risk children, to provide them with education so that they also have a chance to achieve their dreams. And on June 22nd, we'll do a summit, an online summit, Courage Book Summit, Turn Fear into Power, where Dai Manuel will also be a speaker at. So he's going to share a speech there as well. And all the authors, not all of the selection of the authors, will share their most important insights on how they overcame their fears and how they achieved their dreams. And some of the material they're sharing in the summit is not being described in the book. So that's why, and it's also, I think it's a cool opportunity for the audience to just connect with us in person. In case you're watching this after the summit, you can still watch the recording. So yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Dai, for being here, for sharing your wisdom.
Man, it was awesome. It was just great to reconnect with you and I just talk about this subject, you know, because I really, like yourself, feel very passionate about it. You know, I really want, I want this accessible because I know what it's done for my life. You know what it's done for your life. And it's like, you just want to give this to everybody, right? You just want to, here, take it. Because you know what's possible when you accept this? Everything. You know, and it's like, so here. But anyways, I appreciate you. And thank you so much, Obed, for the opportunity to be here and to be part of your book, because I think it's going to change and impact so many people in such a positive way. Plus the fact that it's going to charity to support some I want unfortunate children, and when I say unfortunate, they're in unfortunate situations, but it's because of these types of donations that we can help them and support them. And I remember the orphanages in Bali, and my goodness, they need the help. So I'm just so happy that you're doing this initiative. And it's so those that are watching, hey, don't just buy one book, buy a few for your friends, your family. Remember, you're helping kids. Gosh, this makes a great gift. Anyways, I just wanted to say that because I didn't hear you saying it, Obed. So I'm saying it. I'm going to be buying 10 copies myself. I'm going on the record to say that. And I'm looking forward to sharing those with 10 very close friends.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Beautiful, man. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for watching this podcast. And remember, dare to dream and dare to achieve, because if we can do it, anybody can.